Okay, we have James, aka Luna, back on the show, and I'm very excited because he has been working on a project. So this is coming out of Druid Garden, who we've talked with James about this before, where they've been developing tools and they developed Fast Farmer, and their most recent project, and the one that is super exciting for everybody that is in the Evergreen community, is they've been working on an operating system. And this operating system, dun da da, can be used to reflash your Evergreen device. So if you've had consternation that you're not sure what's happening with Evergreen, if you've been asking in the Discord, hey, what's going on? Am I going to have support? What's going to happen in the long term? Well, the team at Druid Garden has decided that they want to release an operating system and continue to support the Evergreen users. And we also have Phantom, who is one of the other developers at Druid Garden, and they have decided to come on the show and tell us about what they've been working on and tell us about their plans. And I think it's absolutely just fascinating the way that they put this together. So, James, I don't know if you just want to start us off and tell us a little bit about what you're building and what you've decided to do here with supporting the Evergreen devices that are out there in the field.
Yeah, so to get started, we wanted it to be a very kind of simple drop in replacement, but also something that we could get out in a relatively timely manner. So the thing is managed with a web based OS at the moment. So you would install the operating system on top of it, you would connect to the initial web setup dashboard, get logged in, and then the entire management of the operating system is done through a web browser.
So
So
this
at
is
the
kind of
moment,
like when you have your router at home and you dial into like 192.168.0.1, you're in there configuring the router. This would be kind of a similar thing. You're in here configuring the device and the operating system, but you have to figure out where it is on the network or something like that.
and we do have some ideas to hopefully make that easy. So on the Maiden Druid Garden website, we're actually going to have a tool where you can allow it to scan your local network to try and find the devices, which then will allow you to link them from that browser to then get connected to them immediately.
Now, I remember this was one of the things that when we were working on Evergreen, this how do you discover a device that's on your network and make that really easy? So, this was where in the original version of Evergreen, you had this mobile app and you downloaded that, and then you tapped a button when it was connected to your local Wi-Fi, and it scanned and tried to find the device, and then when it found it, it tried to do some auto setup stuff. So, you're thinking about something similar where you have some kind of a discovery app that would help you find the device on the network, and then you'd be able to type those specific things into the browser so you can get connected.
So the Discovery app, because it is also in the browser, can actually just give you a link. So if we can find the devices on the local network, we can give you a link to the device. You can click it, it'll just open up in a new tab, and then you can start the setup of the device.
So tell us a little bit about what you've done with the operating system itself. So you were part of the Evergreen team. You did a lot of work on the operating system, as far as the entire development crew. In fact, I think mostly it was you that did the operating system at Evergreen. So did this feel like you were just creating something with a lot better breadth of knowledge than when we originally started Evergreen? Tell us a little bit about like what this has been like to create this.
Yeah, so the whole process of Evergreen was a great learning experience. There was a lot of stuff even throughout the multiple versions of Evergreen's OS where we changed kind of fundamentally how we were running the applications that were on the device and how we were running kind of different, plugins that we might want to add in the future. So with that, this was kind of built with all of those kind of more lofty goals we had at Evergreen in mind. So stuff like running Pi-hole or Plex on this device, for example, is something we want to have supported right from day one. So it was definitely an expansion of the original OS in the sense that we wanted to be what the original goals were, which is to give kind of the power back to the person who has control of the device and the operating system.
So how does that work with this operating system? You're able to just connect to a full node because this is using Fast Farmer, and Fast Farmer does not have a full node connected to it. So you have to go into a setup page and plug in some full node that you want to be able to connect with because this is a light style farmer?
So for existing fast farmer users and for Evergreen users, because they're all fast farmer users, you can actually come into here and just paste your existing YAML file in. And that will actually set up this device from the existing fast farmer configuration. If you don't have that, we kind of have a guided setup where you can either go with a mnemonic, you can go with a farmer key and a plot NFT's launcher ID, and then have it kind of scan and detect everything for you. And then as far as which nodes you use, I don't know what happened to connection settings. We have 2 different community nodes that are up right now, one that's on testnet and one that's on mainnet. So the testnet one is dev.druid.garden and the mainnet one is just druid.garden.
So you're running a full node infrastructure at your facility in your lab.
Correct.
And so what about the people that had the devices where you were using or where Evergreen required a GPU? Does it still work the same way where you've got a remote decompressor and then there's a fee that's paid to the infrastructure that's running the remote decompressor?
So I did not set up a remote decompression service. There is a service that I have been speaking with called recompute.io. They are currently a service that you can, I believe, pay in both Chia and fiat to get some credits, and then you can use those credits to basically have cloud GPUs that do this for you. I've been talking with them about how we're going to get Evergreen users onboarded, so more potentially to come with that. But if you have a GPU at home, we're going to have extensive guides for how people can set this up with like a local GPU or, any device that they'd have on their network that could do the compute for them.
How did you get connected with the recompute.io guys?
When I started working on Fast Farmer, they were using it as like the main development platform to test their service. So they had found, certain bugs and enhancements that I could put into Fast Farmer, and so they were actively helping me with that development.
Now, the operating system itself, the UI. So what we're looking at here on the screen, this is the development work that's been done where you're visualizing what's happening on the operating system. So what this, I assume, is doing is you're making a bunch of calls into the device and it's harvesting metrics and telling you about what's happening within the operating system. And then you're also able to make configuration changes. And this is this mostly Phantom that's been working on the UI side of things?
Yes.
Phantom, tell us a little bit about like what you've been doing here. So like what's your programming language? Is this all done in Rust? How has it been developing the UI for the Druid Garden OS?
Sure. So I have been developing in Vue and TypeScript mainly, and interfacing with the Rust backend. Specifically, this kind of look, I guess, is based on Quasar, which is like a framework that I've been using. So
Is that the framework that makes like the little colored boxes and stuff and gives you some of the default styling, or did you put together the styling?
Yeah, definitely some of the default styling is based on that. It's still a work in progress, but because I feel like maybe we'll go with more of a green, or maybe kind of match the Druid Garden side a little bit, but we'll see.
So a lot of what you've been doing is getting the metrics on the screen, getting the displays on the screen. So what are some of the basic things that a user can do with the operating system? It looked like you had kind of a graphy metrics page that we were looking at before. What are we looking at right now?
So this is like all the system stats. You can it's a lot of visualizing right now. There's not as much interacting. It shows all your disks, your your core stats, memory, network.
How about temperature? I remember temperature was something that we ran into quite a bit, like because we had to have the fans, and then there were certain situations where things would get too hot because it was using a lot of CPU. Do you have some thermal stuff in here? Is there alerting? Like, help us understand what
Yeah,
a user can
definitely.
do.
So it's a lot of those kinds of stats. It's a lot of usage and temp and frequency for the CPU, as well as all of that for the GPUs. And you can visualize what processes are using how much memory and CPU and all that stuff. So
Now,
And
how about the fun stuff as far as keeping track of how much money you're making, like how much you're getting paid to actually keep running the Chia part of things?
so we don't have a wallet in here yet. Um, I wasn't sure if I wanted
Don't put a
to.
wallet in. Don't put a wallet. That's the wrong way.
I think I would love to just point people towards Sage or Cloud Wallet or any of the other existing wallets that are in the ecosystem.
Payout address
Um,
goes here. That seems like the right
yeah,
way to do it.
the config has that. You can come in here and you just tell us where you want the money to go, and that's the important part.
I always felt like that was something that, like the Bitcoin stuff got wrong. When it coupled the wallet together with something else, it's nice that there's clean separations of concerns. It's like, here's the thing that's managing my funds and my wallet, whatever. That's its own deal. Like, here's the thing that's earning money. Just like send the money here when I earn it. That's the way that I want it. If you commingle the two things, man, things start getting messy. And I feel like maybe that was one of the things that Chia a little bit got wrong with their full node. It was patterned off of that Bitcoin where the full node operation and the wallet were coupled together, and maybe there's some expediency for that because when they first wanted people to get into it, they just wanted to give them an all-in-one solution, but it just feels like it muddies the water, and it also makes the concerns around you're trying to keep track of your money, but you're trying to keep track of this thing that's supposed to be earning you money, and I don't know, it feels like it's a weird coupling of the two things, and I hope that you find a way forward that feels right, that doesn't necessarily make you couple the two things together, because it just feels like wallet development is so different from something like this.
I think that's probably a good point to talk on. We do want to have plugins and capability to extend the OS. So if somebody like Sage Wallet wanted to make a plugin, they could add it into here, and it would immediately be available on whatever web OS that plugin wishes to expose.
So what's your vision for other plugins that would be here? Are you supporting stuff that exists inside the Umbrella ecosystem, or are you thinking about Druid Garden plugins that are going to launch that are going to come from your team?
So we plan to try and support a lot of the big ones that kind of Umbrel does, Plex, Pi-hole, anything that you would kind of think of throwing on Home Assistant, etc. Basically anything that you can run in Docker, you could run as a plugin here. So when you click add, there's nothing that would stop you from doing any generic Docker container and configuring it here to run. So my goal for this is to give people a platform that they can actually use. So for example, one of our demo plugins that we have in here is just like the sample Echo server. And Echo server is great for testing the devices online, and you have connectivity and et cetera, et cetera. So, development plugins like that are also great for people to have.
And as far as something like Plex, that one's maybe a hair bit trickier because you'd have to take some of the storage that's devoted to the Evergreen and dump some of the data so you could actually get some movies or some TV shows or something loaded onto the drives.
Yeah, so people could, in theory, come in here to like the file manager, go into mount, go into, where their Chia plots are and actually delete some of those plots and do what I did and put movies and shows to run Plex on them. So it's not unheard of, and the system here would actually let you manage that and delete the files you wanted. It's going to be a little less true with the new plot format, but with the old one, most of those drives have gigabytes upon gigabytes of free space on them. And if you're doing standard, 1080p movies, you can fit a lot of that within, 40 or 50 gigabytes.
But it's still this is pretty technical. You have to go in here and find the right spots, and then you're putting movies into specific folders. Do you have a goal to try to do some file system stuff that makes it a little easier, or is it more
Yeah.
this is leaning towards the expert side of things where it's like you know what you're doing with your own device and you're kind of managing it yourself?
The core set of plugins like Plex, we are going to have some set of default configuration. So when you come in and look at the browse available plugins, the configuration we're going to have in here for Plex is going to be one that would work by default with the OS. So you would know where to drop your movies, know where to drop your shows. We'll have default folders set up. And then through Plex's web interface, which you would access because it's just a container running on the system, you would be able to configure all of that.
So as far as the vision for what this can do, Pi-hole seems super exciting. I mean, if you don't know what Pi-hole is, it's a way to like configure it so that when you're normally browsing, you don't see ads. So you're setting up your local network so that it just blocks advertising. That's kind of what Pi-hole is for, right?
Yep, it's a DNS-based filter. I don't know if they do more than DNS, but it can block ads on pretty much any service you could think of.
So if you configure this on your device after you've reflashed it, and I guess we're going to have to talk about how you're actually have the vision for getting this. But so Pi-hole, basically you load this plugin onto your old Evergreen device, and then as you're normally browsing on your home network, then it's just blocking stuff that you wouldn't necessarily want to see, or the advertising that you wouldn't. So it's actually upgrading your home network. And this is the vision for the device, is that it can start to do these useful things for you, and you're making an easy way for people to get that on their home network, because otherwise they would have to buy a Raspberry Pi. They'd have to go through all this kind of stuff, but they already have a Raspberry Pi because they have an Evergreen. So you're just adding this small workload on.
Yep, and because Pi-hole already has their own web interface, it's super easy to just link to it, listing one, and you can kind of manage everything in, one spot.
So with Pi-hole having its own interface, did you draw inspiration from this? Is because it doesn't necessarily look exactly similar, but I can see some parallels. So did you look at this as one of the ways where you're like, huh, I wonder if we could do some learning from how Pi-hole works and how the design was done?
I had not actually even looked at this prior to us starting ours.
Well, maybe there's some stuff there to look at. But as I looked at it, I was like, oh, I wonder if, because it sure looks a little bit like it.
Yeah, it does.
So when you were thinking about making the operating system, I know that one of the things that we talked about a lot internally was running something like Plex. But then as this idea of a decentralized internet started to foment in the minds of many, and we saw things like data layer and dig.net, and as we started to see this need for decentralized data, are you hoping that this becomes one of the platforms under which the decentralized data storage internet can start to flourish? Because I always thought that Evergreen was a way forward for that. We didn't quite get to it in everything that we had done and what we had worked on. But do you view this as a platform to start to realize the vision of a decentralized internet? Or is this not something that you see in your future?
I think that with the power of plugins on this device, it would be completely capable of using this in a decentralized storage network or a decentralized internet in general.
But are you waiting for somebody else to make that plugin, or is that something that's in the future for Druid Garden and your team?
I think Druid Garden has a lot more pressing projects that we need to get working on first. We really want to get started on a Rust full node replacement, I think is the next major project. And so it's not out of the question, but I don't know if it would be one of the next things we would work on.
So when you think about a full node running in Rust, running on this platform, does it have a fast enough disk to do that, or would you need to plug something else in and upgrade the device from a hardware perspective?
I think if you are using an SD card, you are not going to be able to eventually keep up with the network. eMMC modules or external storage devices run through USB can work. The best thing to do would be to get like an expansion hat that you could put on the Raspberry Pis to add NVMe storage to it. With one of those, you could definitely run a full node forever on one of these and have no issue. I think what we will probably end up seeing at some point is more of a light full node that you can run on these devices. Something that can still participate in the security of the network, but doesn't necessarily have the entire archival data of the network with it. And that could talk upstream for some of the more complex or, again, archival queries that it gets.
To think about what you mean by that. So this would be where it's replicating signage points and it has a certain amount of data, but it can't fully process blocks because it doesn't have the entire coin database.
Yeah, basically. A node that could participate in more validation of recent stuff, but anything, that was older spends, so to speak, it might not be able to participate. But something that you could still have a local-ish node that could query to most data you would need it to.
As far as all the hardware that's out there in the field, I know that Evergreen had a series of different processors that it ran on. So there was a Raspberry Pi 4, there was a Rock Pi 4, and then there was the Rock Pi 5. And you said this supports x86 as well. So, like, are some of these devices more suited towards running a full node? Probably not those old Raspberry Pi 4s. Is that right? Because they're not upgradable enough?
I think any of the devices actually would be capable of running a full node. Again, it's more about the storage median hooked up to the device than it is the raw compute at the moment. I think even the Pi 4 can keep up with the compute of, validating blocks and moving along the network. It's usually just that communication with the database to keep it moving that ends up being the limiting factor.
I suppose it kind of depends on what sort of plots are in the mix as well. And if you're trying to run Plex at the same time, you're going to start to run out of juice if you get too many different things on there at the same time.
That's definitely true. Too many plugins could definitely end up being a problem, especially if you have quite a large farm hooked up.
So it's kind of like if you had one of the beefier processors and you have a limited number of plugins, maybe you could run the full node. I'm still thinking about from the chipset perspective, what which of those devices are most amenable to upgrading? Because you said you could put a hat on there. Is that something where you'd have to unscrew the device and go snap something onto the board? Because I know that it can plug like an external USB hub, and then you could put like some fast SSD on there, like a USB based NVMe. Because I've definitely done something like that, and that's how I'm running my Bitcoin node at home. Is I'm running it off of some old NVMe that I just went to Micro Center and grabbed an enclosure, and then I have a powered USB hub. So daisy chaining a bunch of stuff that sort of sits external to the devices is entirely possible. I'm still thinking about what you said was when you said you could put a hat on there. So is it some of those Rock Pi 4s have like a slot where you can snap something on top of the chip and then put the NVMe directly onto the board?
So a lot of the Raspberries, the Rocks, etc., they all have different hats that you can, you slap on top of the board. It goes over the top of the GPIO pins usually, and then ones that you want to run like an NVMe drive, you can actually get a PCI lane by using a ribbon connector between the hat and then the camera slot on the device.
But this is not for the faint of heart. This is straight hacker style because you gotta unscrew this and you gotta snap things together. I mean, if you can put together Legos, you could probably do it. If you're used to building PCs, this is a no-brainer. But for the mere mortals out there, this might be a somewhat tricky upgrade.
It's definitely a little more tech savvy. I think with a proper guide, though, most people would be able to walk their way through it.
And as far as how you see this playing out, so you guys are working on the operating system. This thing is nearish completion. Tell us a little bit about timeline, and then I want to get into the mechanics of if you've got one, how this is going to work. So first off, let's start. this thing is looking pretty cooked. Like, is it cooked? How close are you?
The final things we really need to kind of finish up are the UI, wrap up the kind of colors, make the flows a little bit better. Like we want the farmer log thing here to be full screened and kind of fit a little bit better with the boxes. So it's mostly just the look and feel at the moment. The actual underlying guts and how it all works and the API communications and the security, the wireless setups, like the device management, that's all cooked. At this point, it's just the kind of finishing up the interface.
So Phantom, you've got a busy couple weeks ahead of you to kind of get, sounds like quite a bit of UI stuff. Is that all falling to you?
Yeah, for the most part, for sure.
We'll definitely be keeping him busy.
Right on. Okay, so after these other things that you want to do, you got some polish that you're doing to the operating system, but a lot of the data is flowing in. How does an Evergreen user actually start using Druid Garden OS? Is it the first thing you got to do is actually crack the box open, dig that SD card out, and then flash the SD card? Is that sort of the first step?
Yep, so we're going to provide image files on the website, druid.garden, and then from there you can, if you know what device you have, you can just grab the correct image file and go. If you don't know what device you have, we are going to have guides to help people open up their Evergreen and try and figure out, basically looking at the board, which one of those devices it is. And then from there, you'd select the image. We're going to give people, again, a guide to kind of go through flashing and setting it up on their device. If you have an SD card, most people have, the micro SD readers that they can plug in and read it. If you have an eMMC module, it is a little bit trickier. We will provide links to the flashing units that people can find off of Amazon. There is also a way that I have seen that you can supposedly do it through plugging a Raspberry Pi into a computer via one of its USB ports, but I actually haven't gotten that to work and tested that yet. So it's probably easier to just, spend $5 on the adapter and flash it.
How
But then,
about
yes,
selling,
once
how
you
about selling a pre-installed SD card? So all I have to do is open it up and jam a new micro SD card in there. Is that in the works, or is that too much trouble for you guys?
that is not off the table, but I'd have to get a massive amount of SD cards kind of ahead of time, I think.
Maybe a
Not,
pre-order.
yeah, pre-order would be nice. We could do
Yeah.
that. We could definitely set something up.
I know I've seen that with some of the homebrew gaming stuff where they produce somewhat specialized hardware, and it's like, well, we're going to make as many as people want. So your pre-order window is between here and here. Get your order in if you want one, and then we're going to make whatever gets ordered, and after that, you're SOL.
And we definitely know what SD cards you need to get nowadays. The years of experience at Evergreen has definitely led us to figure out which SD cards are the more reliable ones and are going to last longer term. It's the Samsung ones.
So the trick here is that you actually need to take the little brain micro SD card out of there and either reflash that thing or put a brand new one in there. And the only unfortunate thing is that Evergreen didn't ship with the little USB to micro SD adapter. So you're going to have to get one of those off of Amazon, or if you've got one in your house or a buddy's got one, then you're going to have to pull that micro SD card out, slam it into that USB reader, put that in your computer, and then reflash that. I remember doing that a lot. Like that was one of the main steps that we had to do repeatedly during development. So I still carry around that little micro SD to USB flasher device because I just found it so useful to have one of those. So that's going to be the trick, is you're going to need one of those.
You can also grab them typically from Target or Best Buy or Micro Center as well. A lot of the big box stores that sell anything related to cameras will have them.
Lucas, is all of this making sense? I know that for me, this seems like all of this seems like it's just part and parcel, because I spent so much time deep in the guts of helping to make Evergreen become a reality. And so to me, what they're doing at Druid Garden to help create the operating system that will kind of carry the ball forward seems natural. But does all of this make sense? Are you seeing the vision for, I have an Evergreen, here's how I can get to Druid Garden OS, or do you feel like there's some stuff that isn't quite isn't quite clicking yet.
No, it's making sense to me. I was glad to hear that you said that selling pre-flashed SD cards was not the table, because I would lean in that direction. So because I've never played around with the Raspberry Pi, so it would just be a heck of a lot easier to sign up for that SD card and swap it out whenever it comes out.
You know what might be fun? We might have to have these guys back on where we do like a live demo of like, here's how to reflash your Evergreen. That might be be a cool episode.
I would certainly, you could probably use me as the dummy for that. But a question for you, James. Are you guys envisioning also like people coming to you with equipment, or hopping on Druid Garden and looking up the equipment that were in the Evergreen and building their own systems? So, or is this something you're thinking about only for legacy Evergreen systems?
So one of the kind of key components with the Evergreen systems was the case that they all kind of went into. It's what lets you stack the drive on top of each other and kind of make it easy to manage. I envision recommending parts for people to build their own systems, but I don't think they're going to be that similar to the original Evergreen devices. I think
Hold
they're
on a
better.
second. Now, I know that I always ran like Frankenstein Evergreen setups at my house. So like I would buy just the regular old CanaKit Raspberry Pi because that's what
Yes.
I had first. And then I plugged that thing into a JBOD. So I still have my Evergreen where it is I've got a couple of the drive cases. They're beautiful. Like I love them. They're great. But I also think like just a regular old JBOD tower, there's nothing wrong with that form factor. And, partly I think what started to get a little weird with Evergreen was as people wanted somewhat pro style kits, this idea that they would buy a lot of these shell cases for drives, it was like, well, what are we doing here? Like, why aren't we going after just JBODs? There's lots of those that are out there. Like there's an easy way to do this. And if it would have been where we said, all right, we're going to ship you a JBOD and then you're going to get 5 pre-plotted drives and they're going to be in a box. And then you just jam the 5 drives in and then plug the JBOD into the back of your Evergreen. Boom, done. Bingy bam. I thought that was always pretty slick. And that's actually how I've been running my Evergreen for forever. So I think a Frankenstein build like that doesn't seem that far afield. You just buy a CanaKit, hook it up to a JBOD, but it's getting the plotted drives. That was always the trick. So,
Yep.
What's the future there, James? Are you guys going to still keep selling pre-plotted drives? And what happens when the new plot format comes out? Can I just hook my Druid Garden OS and say, here's where there's a GPU somewhere on my network, and it'll just flow plots around and refill my drives with the upgraded plot format? Or are people going to have to figure that stuff out on their own?
I would definitely hope that by the time the new plot format is out, we have some form of conversion software out there. And whether that's using a local GPU or potentially even, again, like the Recompute guys, they might have something that we can make available to start converting people's stuff over remotely. Especially because the new format, the individual plot files are much smaller, which does make them a lot more feasible to do over the network.
I wonder if there's something where you could say, here's an additional little piece of software that I would install on my gaming rig, and then just plug your Evergreen drive into it, and it just slowly plots it, overnight or something, and then upgrades you to the new plot format.
There's some software out there that we used for tooling kind of in parallel with Evergreen. That was doing that for OG and NFT plots to compressed plots, and I definitely think that software could be repurposed to target the new plot format instead. And we could definitely release that. I would just need to clean it up a little bit.
I'm still thinking about this plugin architecture. Hopefully, there's some teams out there that really care about running distributed software. I'm looking at you, Circuit DAO, because I'm confident that that oracle that they're going to run, that they're going to want to get away from having a single oracle. So I would not be surprised at all to see something like Circuit DAO say, here's how you can run the oracle that's needed for doing byte cache and being able to run that on your Druid Garden OS. That's got to be in their mind after they hear what we're talking about on this show.
So the way the plugins work, you can do Docker containers, you can target GitHub Rust projects, or you can target binary files that exist just, in a bucket or something like that. We also plan to add support for NPM GitHub projects and Python GitHub projects. But that's a little bit, later.
And then how are people going to get updates to the operating system itself? So I know one of the criticisms that you and I had was this distribution mechanism that Evergreen used. It was this kind of nightmare IoT thing that existed, and it felt clunky and cumbersome. Do you have a vision for how people would get the latest version of the operating system in kind of an easy way, or is it you'd have to pull it out, reflash it, and do all that stuff all over again?
It should be self-updating, or not auto-updating, but self-updating in the sense where you click this check updates button here like you would plugins. We're going to have another one in the Systems tab over here for check for updates. What that does is it's going to hit a remote YAML file that we are hosting that just kind of has the different versions that are available. If it detects there's a new one, it's going to hit the GitHub repo, which is going to be completely open source. It will then build from source the new OS on your device, and then it'll replace itself.
And so you can do that without rebooting?
The device itself doesn't have to reboot. And any major changes that are going to come to the OS, like I will say, there are some times you should reboot. Like if we do OS updates and we get some sort of a flag from apt that says, hey, you should reboot, we'll probably auto reboot the device. But for the most part, you can update the OS software and any of the plugins running on it real time without having to reboot the system.
And is the underlying operating system based on Raspbian, or like what are you using as the base operating system here?
We are using Armbian.
Armbian. What about that newfangled Rust operating system that you were playing around with? That was not suitable for this?
That is not suitable to getting a project done in time. No. Maybe someday, but Armbian is pretty much the industry standard when it comes to running across as many IoT devices as you want. And they recently added x86 support, so I've been very happy to use them to do the x86 builds as well.
And now you always had a good relationship with Mad Max. So is this supporting Mad Max straight away from day one, Gigahorse and all that kind of stuff?
Yep, Gigahorse from day one. We completely rewrote the Gigahorse Fast Farmer to not delay this anymore. The original one is still kind of in a legal limbo at the moment. So we took the open source Fast Farmer, completely revamped it. There's a branch in the open source repo you could see called Custom Harvester. We've basically redone all of the gut internals so that instead of having to have the the closed source forks, like Gigahorse or potentially even Dr. Plotter, instead of having those closed source ones having to be a complete fork of the farmer, they now can be, a single Rust file that just extends a couple of key functions in the harvester protocol, basically how to talk to the plots. And once you extend those couple of key functions, it slaps into the rest of the Fast Farmer ecosystem where it actually manages all of the metrics and the rest of the farming experience for you. So I have a new Gigahorse version of the farmer that I've talked with Max and we got it built. It supports the new 5000 series GPUs, something that the old one does not. So it's a fully new built from scratch version that has more features and support.
And if people are excited about this and they want to get connected with what's going on, is the Druid Garden Discord kind of the best place to connect with you guys and your team and hear about updates? Is that the vision?
Yes, the Discord is definitely going to be the best place to reach out directly to us.
Okay, so we'll make sure that there's a link to that in the show. So if you're looking to catch up with how this operating system could be used on your Evergreen device, or if you're looking to build some kind of a Franken-build, which I alluded to, I think that that's not going to be that far afield or hard to do. So if you feel relatively comfortable with how Raspberry Pi works and you can put together a Cana kit, if you can snap together Legos, I'm telling you, you can do it. So be bold, get yourself a Cana kit if you didn't manage to get an Evergreen while Evergreen was still shipping devices. And then if you've got a JBOD, you can definitely make this work. So don't feel like you're left out if you didn't get an Evergreen, because I think that there's definitely a way forward. And if you're an Evergreen user and you really want one of those pre-flashed SD cards, get on the Discord, insert yelling at these guys, and you probably make enough noise that it'll make them want to do a run of a bunch of pre-flashed SD cards.
We'll do it. We'll get pre-orders.
Lucas, what other questions have you got, or do you feel like we kind of nailed it?
I think you almost nailed it. I'm pretty sure it's Franken-build, not Franken-build. But
Frankenstein was the monster, so Frankenstein was the scientist. That's James. He's Frankenstein.
oh, I thought he was his great grandson. Rates have gone up, but no, James, congratulations and thank you for putting the work. Fan of you too, and the rest of the guys at Druid Garden, or the folks at Druid Garden. Very, very excited to see this entering the Chia ecosystem, and I'm glad you guys put the work into it. So thanks.
Thank you guys for having us on. We appreciate it.
All right, we'll watch for this to come out probably like May. Is that right? Sometime in May. That's the timeline.
We're hoping for beta testers next week. If you are interested, please contact me. And then, yes, a couple weeks after that, so probably right at the beginning of May, to get the release.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching for the new OS. I will definitely be looking forward to this because I'm used to flashing my operating system, so I'll probably put my old SD card to the side there and then flash a brand new one and give this a try, because I'm super excited to give it a run. So can't wait to give it a try, and I'll be in that early beta along with joining up on the Discord. So looking forward to connecting with you guys and staying abreast of how this operating system is developing and how we can all use it to keep our devices and all of our drives continuously farming Chia. All right.
Great.
And we'll see you guys next time on FOMO.